Hello, and welcome to Unearthing the Truth, a betrayal of trust in Iceland's Adventist Church, a very real and still ongoing story of greed, faith, and conflicts of interest. Before we get into our story, it's worth taking the time for some introductions. The setting is the small Nordic nation of Iceland, specifically the southwest, between the capital city of Reykjavik and the nearby village of Thorlákshafn. Our story also involves the Seventh Day Adventist Church. For those who are unfamiliar, this is a Protestant church with tens of millions of adherents worldwide. Seventh Day Adventists prefer as flat a hierarchical structure as possible, often treating organizational hierarchies and institutions as just necessary rather than something to be encouraged. They believe in charitable works and, of course, sharing their message. There are three levels of the church that concern us. These are the General Conference, or GC. You can think of this as the main headquarters, located in the United States. Next is the Trans-European Division, or TED. This is the level of the church that deals with a certain cross-section of European churches. Finally, there's the Icelandic Conference, or IC. This is the level that concerns us most, as it deals with the Adventist Church in Iceland. Each conference functions like an administrative unit, but ultimate power rests with the regular church members, who elect the governing body of the conference, which is called the Conference Executive Committee. This committee is made up of 2 to 3 paid officers and 4 to 5 laymen. In the case at hand, it's the Icelandic Conference's Executive Committee that concerns us most. In addition to this, there's a local private company called Eden, which is central to this case. A few of the individuals who are central to this story are Erikur Ingvarsson, co-owner of Eden, Kristin Olafsson, Eden's other co-owner, and Gavin Anthony, president of the Icelandic Conference and a member of the Executive Committee. Other people and organizations will appear over the course of our story, but these are the key players and worth introducing in advance. So without any further preamble, let's get started. Welcome to the Unearthing the Truth podcast. This is a story unfolding in real time about faith, community, corruption, and a quest for the truth. Our story focuses on the Icelandic Conference of the Seventh Day Adventist Church, which from now on we'll just call IC. They are in the middle of a struggle with big business. Through investments and donations from its members over the years, the IC has come to own land with 2 potentially very profitable gravel mines. The way these mines are used and their assets sold is currently dividing the church, mainly between its members and its executive committee, which is the ruling body of the IC. The IC is small, only about 100 to 150 active members, and so the division is largely defined by family ties and friendships. The executive committee supports the deal, as do some church members. This group of supporters is largely made up of those who stand to benefit from the deal, or their families and friends who are loyal to them. Those who oppose the deal see it as a threat to the very spirit and future of the IC itself. The business deal that is causing all this trouble revolves around a contract between the IC, Eden, and a German mining giant, Heidelberg Materials. Eden and Heidelberg Materials want to use the mines at Mount Lamberfell and Mount Littler Sandfell, as well as construct a processing factory for the extracted material in the village of Thorlákshafn. The contract is of such magnitude that it will transform the quiet and peaceful village of Thorlákshafn and affect the surrounding region. The estimated profit will run in billions of ISK, and it is the largest business project the IC has ever been involved in since Adventism arrived in Iceland. This case not only threatens the future of Adventism in Iceland, but also, because of the size of the mining operations, the ecology of the area, at a time when the world at large is seeing a rise in the capture of institutions by big business and a continuing slide towards irreversibly damaging our planet. The story of the Adventist Church in Iceland is a story of our world as a whole. This is a story that begins with land that the church bought in 1947 in the Ölfus municipality in the south of Iceland. The property is called Breithabolstatha, the site of the two mines, Mount Lamberfell and Mount Littler Sandfell, but it also has a richer history than that. Breithabolstatha has been the site of an academy and boarding school, and after it closed in 1995, three couples in the IC created an association called the Hiraldalsetrith, which was specifically dedicated to looking after the land and farming it, at no cost to the church. Without the Hiraldalsetrith, the church would have actually sold the land long ago. The history of the land is important, as it serves to show us just what the IC stands for. Its assets are meant to further the mission and views of the church, give back to the land and those in need. In this light, its members use them in the spirit of goodwill, just like the Hiraldalsetrith Association did by looking after Breithabolstatha at no cost to the IC. Now, this is all changing with the profitability of the two mines on the land. The goal now, for a few members of the IC, is to make money for their own gain from church assets. The two mines, which had been active with small-scale operations for decades, sparked the interest of two church members, Erikur Ingvarsson and Kristin Olofsson. In the early 2000s, they approached the executive committee of the IC to create a company called Eden, which would expand mining operations and create money for the IC. At least, that's what the company was supposed to do. As we'll see, it's not clear that the IC is the real winner here. So, in 2008 and 2009, Eden signed a contract with the IC to begin mining in Mount Lamberfell and Mount Littler Sandfell. This is really where all the trouble begins, and it really does begin almost immediately. But before we jump into it, let's take a step back, because there are more elements here to consider than just Eden. There are two other situations that are all deeply interconnected. The first is the relationship between the executive committee, the church members, and Eden. In future episodes, we'll see how the executive committee's business dealings with Eden have caused a rift in the IC, and how the executive committee has continually violated the IC's laws in order to continue doing business with Eden. The second is the expansion of Eden's business and partnership with Heidelberg Materials, and the consequences of this for the IC, the environment, and the people of the town of Frohlagshaft. The real catalyst for all of this is Eden, and this is what we'll be diving into today, the creation and history of Eden. I'm your host George, and welcome to the first episode of Unearthing the Truth. It all starts in 2008 when Eden begins mining, and there are problems almost immediately. The original 2008 and 2009 contracts signed by Eden and the IC were meant for the production of rock wool in Norway. Rock wool is mainly used for building insulation. It's one of those things which are around us all the time, but we never really know about unless you're in the insulation or mining business. Eden's job was to extract raw materials from the mines and send them to Norway. The very first shipment of raw materials that arrived from Mount Lamberfell to Norway was unusable. Apparently, nobody, not XCOM nor Eden, thought to check if the raw materials they were selling could actually be used to create rock wool. It's hard to imagine such a huge oversight in a mining operation. Such an oversight should cause some serious questions to be asked about the competence of Eden to conduct mining operations at all. Imagine if someone had a contract to supply wheat to a pasta-making business and didn't even bother to check if they were growing wheat or not. There are three key points to note from the 2008 and 2009 mining contracts with Eden here. Firstly, that the express purpose of Eden was to create a steady, long-term revenue for the owner. The purpose of the company Eden is to create steady revenue for the owners of the mines. The owners of the mines being the IC. That quote is word for word from the contract and really underlines what the purpose of the whole mining operation is. It's to create profit for the church so that it can continue its mission of preaching the gospel. The second point to note is one of the stipulations in the contract. It explicitly stated that if Eden failed to make an agreement with a potential buyer, the mining contract between the IC and Eden would expire. Yet, this did not happen. Despite failing to determine the correct minerals required for rock wool and failing to meet the requirements of the contract, the executive committee did not cancel its contract with Eden. Thirdly, in the 2009 contract, It stated that the mining operation was not to be transferred to another company. They had the explicit right to utilize the mine, which according to the contract means that they could extract and sell any minerals. The fact that no transfer was a stipulation in the contract means that no third party could use the mine in the way that Eden had the rights to, i.e., the third party could not extract and sell minerals. In other words, they were allowed to hire workers or contractors to mine for them, but not to transfer or sublease the contract to another company that would then mine and sell for themselves. The consequences of the global financial crash in 2008 put an end to the failed mining operations after they wrapped up in 2009 for Eden. The financial crash meant there were not many business opportunities for the mine after the failed export attempt with Rockwool. Though the points mentioned above from the contracts in 2008 and 2009 would continue to have negative consequences for the IC and its members when mining resumed in 2017. With the start of mining operations in 2017, Eden still had the permission to mine, despite the fact that they mismanaged the operation in 2009, and the contract could have been terminated then. In their management of the mine, until the present day, we'll go on to see how they will work against the best interests of the IC and break the non-transferability of the mining operation as stated in the contract. In this new stage of mining for Eden, they would change their strategy. It seems like after their failed attempt to sell minerals themselves in 2009, they would engage a third party in order to do the mining and sale of the minerals for them. That's right. Remember what I just told you about the contract with Eden, stipulating that they could not transfer the permission to mine to a third party? Well, it appears as if they did just that. 3 questions that need to be asked then are they allowed to have a third party running the mining operations? If Eden is not doing any actual mining, then what are they doing? And does the transfer of the mining operations and rights to a third party benefit the IC and its mission? First things first, let's get to know the actual mining operations from 2017 to 2021 under the management of Eden. They outsourced the work to 2 different mining companies, Geertea Vagtakker EHF until the summer of 2021, and then Lamberfell EHF for the last portion of 2021. Both Geertea and Lamberfell were in charge of mining, processing, and selling what was mined. And during this time, it was mainly pillow lava and other gravel that was sold to make things like concrete. Throughout the 4-year period, it seems like Eden was only a middleman between the IC and Geertea and Lamberfell. Some concerned church members spoke to lawyers to determine if Eden was in breach of contract by hiring a third party during the 2017 to 2021 period, a period in which they were still under the 2009 contract. The lawyers determined that Eden was in breach of the contract by transferring the operation to a third party. On top of this, the total remuneration which the IC was supposed to receive was much lower than what it should have been. Some evidence the lawyers cited is the following. Lamberfell clearly stated on their website that they were mining in the mines owned by the IC during this time, while a sales contract between Eden and Geertea shows sales statements, which seem to indicate a transfer of mining rights from Eden to Geertea. Both of these pieces of evidence point to the fact that Eden was not doing the mining. So this answers our first and second question. It seems like Eden was not allowed to have a third party running the mining operation, according to the 2009 contract, which they were operating under. All available evidence would also indicate that Eden was only acting as a middleman and not in fact doing any actual mining. These 2 answers lead us back to the third question. Did the IC benefit from these business dealings? The contract required that the IC receive 10% of sales revenue, i.e. 10% of the price that was paid for the minerals when they were bought and transported from the site, the final market value of the minerals. Additionally, the IC should receive 10% of both earnings before taxes and after taxes. The fact of transferring the mining operations to a third party dramatically reduced the amount which the IC received from 2017 to 2021. Total sales and income derived over this period amounts to approximately the IC received circa 25 million ISK. Eden received circa 180 to 190 million ISK in sales revenue, Geertea and Lamberfell received an estimated 1.5 billion ISK in sales revenue. According to these figures, the IC received a little over 12% of the amount that Eden sold the unmined minerals to Geertea and Lamberfell for. This is a problem because the IC was supposed to receive 10% of the final market value of the minerals. 10% of final market value would have been around 150 million ISK instead of 25 million. To add to this issue is that Eden profited somewhere between 155 to 165 million ISK for merely being a middleman. This is profit which does not go back into the IC, but is gained as private income for Eden off of the IC's property. What Eden is basically doing here is renting out the mine to another company and charging them a fee. To really picture it, let's imagine a simpler scenario. Imagine you have a house to rent and you engage a rental agent to look after the property. You would obviously expect to get the bulk of the rent. Maybe the rental agent would get 10% and you would get the rest. But the crazy thing is, if we were to apply the actual payment structure from the mining operations between 2017 and 2021 to this imaginary scenario, Eden is the rental agent and IC is the owner of the house. But Eden, the rental agent, is getting 90% of the rent and the IC, the owner, is getting only 10%. This is literally the opposite of how it should be. Plus, the mine is a finite resource. It will eventually run out, and so the profit that the IC can make is inherently limited. To add insult to injury, the IC does not even need Eden as a rental agent for the mines, as one of the church members found out when they spoke to Geertea and Lamberfell. One of the employees said, Erikur takes no financial risk. We do. We pay him, and then he turns around and pays you a fraction of what he receives from us for doing nothing. We'd be more than willing to pay you directly if you'd make a contract directly with us, and that way, your share would of course be many times higher than it is now. The statement by an employee at one of the companies that was doing the mining really underlines the apparent uselessness of Eden during this time. Eden was supposedly established by IC members in order to safeguard the best interests of the IC. The sad truth, though, is, as the quote we just heard tells us, that the IC would be better off without Eden and just doing business with people outside the IC. We can now answer our third question. Did the IC profit from all of this? It's clear they did not. They did not receive the 10% of final market value, as stipulated in the contract, and the amount that Eden made during this period seems to be money which they did not earn, as they did no actual mining themselves. There are a few more issues which should be outlined about Eden's business practices. Most of the mining we've spoken about up until now has been on Mount Lamberfell. However, there was also mining on Mount Littler Sandfell during this time, and Eden did not obtain the proper mining licenses, which is illegal, and that it is a fact that the IC did not receive any payment for sales resulting from the mining operations. These things would obviously be a clear breach of the contract between Eden and IC. With the checkered past of Eden's business practices and the alleged illegal mining on Mount Littler Sandfell, we have to wonder what other shady or illegal business practices we could still be unaware of. The researchers for this podcast have heard of more alleged attempts by Eden to take cash payments in order to avoid putting sales on their books. While this has not been proven, given what we've seen from Eden so far, it wouldn't be surprising. More investigation of Eden's business expenses reveal very high operating costs. For example, during the year 2021, Eden's operating revenues was 73,576,344 Icelandic krona, while their operating costs were 71,843,505 ISK, leaving only a profit of 1,170,616 ISK. We've seen that Eden Mining was engaged in no actual mining activity. They did not even own any mining equipment that was used on site. So what could justify such a high cost of business? This has led IC members to wonder, on top of the issue of third-party transfer, what is the benefit of Eden to the IC? The primary goal of Eden was to secure a steady flow of income for the IC, and the high operating costs and low profits show that this is not being achieved. Instead, what the high operating costs and low profit reveals is that the IC is being further marginalized from its share of the profit before and after corporate taxation, as per the original agreement. The agreement stated that the IC should receive 10% of the market value of the product from Eden, which we already know they did not, due to transfer of mining rights, which significantly reduced the IC share. Secondly, the IC should have received 10% of Eden's profits before and after tax. If Eden, as a middleman, had healthy operating expenses of, for example, 10% of sales, then the IC would have received a weighted average of 24% of Eden's sales. Instead, the IC received 13% of the intermediary value negotiated between Eden and the mining company, not of the market value as it was supposed to be. As they are a pure middleman, they should have limited operating costs. They're not the ones doing the mining, but the reality is the opposite. What we're seeing here is that the IC gets marginalized at least twice within the same agreement, once by transfer of mining rights and twice by inflating operating costs to ensure there's no corporate profit sharing to be had either. It's a double whammy. At the end of the day, the IC is losing irreplaceable assets. Once material is removed from the mine, it's gone forever, and they're barely making any money off it. It seems that Eden does this deliberately, as the lack of profitability is consistent over the entire contract period. Anecdotal evidence suggests that Erikur and Kristin are fine with deliberately inflating business expenses because the contract does not place a cap on business expenses. The company has been purchasing numerous new pickup trucks and an RV. With such a small amount of published profits by Eden, one has to wonder how such expenses could be justified. These are also the types of expenses which inflate the operating costs of Eden and reduce the amount of corporate profit sharing which is paid out to the IC. Any reasonable person knows that this is unscrupulous and dishonest behavior. All business contracts should be based on good faith and good business ethics that build trust and do not aim to undermine the party issuing the contract. This should particularly be the case when Christian businessmen are making contracts with their own church. Despite all we've seen in this episode, and with unanswered questions hanging in the air around Eden's business dealings, in 2022, Eden was rewarded with a new contract by the executive committee of the IC, amid even more controversy. The 2022 contract really changes everything and puts Eden in a position to make even more profit in conjunction with Heidelberg Materials. But that is a story for a future episode. First, we need to find out what was happening within the IC itself. How is it that the executive committee, who are supposed to be working in the IC's best interest, let this happen? Join us next time, where we'll investigate what was going on between Eden, the executive committee, and its church members who were protesting against Eden's business practices. This is a really vital part of the story. The executive committee has enabled the business practices of Eden, and they are supposed to represent the members of the church. But as we will see, there is strong opposition to Eden.